Hello, and welcome to this lesson on a review of fractions. Alright, so the first thing with fractions I want to take a look at is reducing fractions. Now, there's a lot of different ways to reduce fractions, so this is just kind of one of the many different ways to reduce a fraction. The first thing we want to do is we want to find a number that will evenly divide into the numerator, the top number, and the denominator, the bottom number. So we want to find the number that divides into top and bottom evenly. This value is called a common factor. We are now going to divide the numerator and the denominator by the common factor. And then after that, we are going to repeat steps 1 and 2 until the only common factor we get is a 1. So let's take a look at a few examples. So example number 1, we want to reduce 6 over 8. So the solution, we want to find a number that will divide evenly into 6 and 8. Well, 2 will divide evenly into the numerator, the 6, and the denominator, the 8. So dividing the numerator and the denominator by 2, so 6 divided by 2 gives me a 3, and 8 divided by 2 gives me a 4. So now I'm looking at 3 over 4, and if I try to find a number that divides 3 and 4 evenly, the only number that works there is a 1. So the answer here is going to be a 3/4. So we have reduced this 6 over 8 to lowest form. Let's take a look at another example. Example number 2, we want to reduce 12 over 18. So the solution. Well, I noticed that 6 will divide evenly into both the numerator, the 12, and the denominator, the 18. So dividing the numerator and the denominator by 16, that gives us 12 divided by 6 is a 2, 18 divided by 6 is a 3. Well, taking a look at the 2 over 3, well, the only number that will divide 2 and 3 evenly is a 1, so that means my answer is a 2/3. All right, I've got one more example. This one's a little bit more challenging. So let's say I want to reduce 18 over 48. So the solution. Well, I noticed that 2 will divide evenly into both the numerator, 18, and the denominator, 48. So dividing the numerator and the denominator by 2, well, that gives me the following. 18 divided by 2 is a 9. 48 divided by 2 is a 24. So I have a 9 over 24. So now looking at the 9 over 24, I notice that 3 can divide evenly into both 9 and 24. So dividing top and bottom by 3, 9 divided by 3 gives me an 8. 9 divided by 3 is a 3, and 24 divided by 3 gives me an 8. And the only number that will divide 3 and 8 evenly is a 1, so my answer is 3 over 8. Now, some of you might have noticed that you could divide top and bottom by 6, and if you did that, you would have gotten to the 3 over 8 faster. So, if you find something called the greatest common divisor, the greatest common factor, then you could actually get to that answer in one step. But if you don't see that greatest common divisor, then you kind of do it step by step. Okay, so that's how I'm going to be reducing my fractions. Okay, so let's take a look at the next thing. Let's take a look at converting mixed numbers to improper fractions. Now, I call them improper fractions, but some textbooks do not call them improper anymore. They just call them fractions. So that's why I've got the improper in parentheses. So to convert a mixed number to improper fractions, I'm going to multiply the whole number by the denominator, that's the bottom number, and then add that result to the numerator, the top number. And I keep the denominator the same. So let's take a look at an example of this. So, example number 4. I want to convert the mixed number to an improper fraction. So I have 3 and 2/5. 3 is the whole number. So I'm going to do 3 times 5, 3 times the bottom number, and then I'm going to add that to the top number, 2. So I have 3 times 5 plus 2, and I keep the bottom number, the 5, the same. So 3 times 5 is 15 plus 2 is 17, so that gives me 17 over 5. So I've converted this mixed number to an improper fraction. Now let's take a look at converting an improper fraction into mixed numbers. So to do this, we are going to divide the numerator, the top number, by the denominator, the bottom number, using long division. The whole number is going to be the quotient of the division problem. The new numerator is going to be the remainder, and the denominator will stay the same. So converting this improper fraction into a mixed number. So I've got 17 over 5. So setting up my long division, I've got 5 that I'm dividing into 17. Well, 5 can divide into 17 3 times. 3 times 5 gives me a 15, and then when I subtract, that gives me a 2. And in this long division setup, this top number is my quotient, and this bottom number is my remainder. So, the quotient is the whole number, so that's going to be 3. The remainder is the new numerator, and I keep the same number on the bottom. So 17 over 5, that becomes 3 and 2/5. All right, let's take a look at how to multiply fractions. So what we want to do is we want to convert all mixed numbers to improper fractions. After we do that, we need to multiply numerator with numerator, and then multiply denominator with denominator. And then finally, we reduce the fraction. So let's take a look at this example. So we want to multiply these fractions. 2/3 times 3/4. So for my solution, I'm going to multiply numerator with numerator and denominator with denominator. So on the top, I'm going to have 3 times 2, or 2 times 3. On the bottom, I've got 3 times 4. So 2 times 3 gives me a 6. 3 times 4 gives me a 12. I now need to reduce this fraction. Well, I notice that 6 will divide both top and bottom. So 6 divided by 6 is going to give me a 1, and 12 divided by 6 gives me a 2. So this 12 over 6 reduces to a 1/2. So the answer to this problem is going to be a 1/2. All right, let's take a look at dividing fractions. So to divide fractions, first thing we want to do is we want to convert all mixed numbers to improper fractions. After that, we are going to convert my division problem to a multiplication problem. And the way that works is we keep the first fraction the same. We're going to change division into multiplication, and then we flip the second fraction. Then after we've converted it to multiplication, we multiply numerator with numerator, multiply denominator with denominator, and then we reduce the fraction. So let's take a look at this example, example number 7. So we want to divide these two fractions, 2/3 divided by 3/4. So first thing I want to do is I want to convert this to a multiplication problem. So I keep the first fraction, the 2/3, the same. I change division to multiplication, and then I flip the second fraction. So the 3 over 4 becomes a 4 over 3. I'm now going to multiply numerator with numerator and denominator with denominator. So this is going to give me a 2 times 4 on the top and a 3 times 3 on the bottom. 2 times 4 gives me an 8. 3 times 3 gives me a 9. And 8 over 9, that fraction will not reduce, so my answer is going to be 8 over 9. let's take a look at adding and subtracting fractions. So for adding and subtracting fractions, well, we want to convert all mixed numbers to improper fractions. After that, we want to convert all the fractions to a common denominator. Once we do that, we're going to add or subtract the numerators, and we keep the denominator the same. And then finally, we reduce the fraction. So let's take a look at example number 8. So here we want to subtract these fractions. I have 7 over 4 minus 5 over 6. Well, we need to get a common denominator before we can subtract these fractions. I'm going to find the least common denominator, sometimes called LCD, by listing the common multiples of each denominator. So to list the multiples of 4, that's my first denominator, I'm going to count by 4. So the multiples of 4, I get 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, and that list goes on and on. I'm now going to list the multiples of 6. So the multiples of 6, I'm going to count by 6, so that gives me 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, and 36. Well, I want to find the smallest number common to both lists. This value is the LCD, the least common denominator. So the smallest value common to both of these lists happens to be 12. So the least common denominator, the LCD, of those two fractions is going to be 12. I now want to rewrite these two fractions so that there is now a 12 on the bottom. So I want to rewrite my fractions so that I have 12 in the new denominator. So to rewrite 7 over 4, I have to ask myself, what do I got to multiply 4 by, that's the number on the bottom, in order to get 12, that LCD? Well, in this case, I would need a 3. So, since I need a 3, I'm going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by 3. So, 7 times 3, that gives me a 21, and 4 times 3, that gives me a 12. So that converts this 7 over 4 into a fraction where there's a 12 on the bottom. I am now going to do the same thing with 5 over 6. So I ask myself, what do I need to multiply 6 by, that's the bottom number, in order to get 12? That's my least common denominator. So in this case, I need a 2. So I will multiply the numerator, the top number, and the denominator, the bottom number, by a 2. So doing that, taking the top number 5, multiplying that by 2, the bottom number 6, multiplying that by 2, 5 times 2 is 10, 6 times 2 is 12. So that converts that 5 over 6 into an over 12. So my original problem, which was 7 over 4 minus 5 over 12, that's going to become a 21 over 12 minus 10 over 12. Subtracting these numerators, I'm going to get 21 minus 10, which gives me 11 over 12. And this fraction will not reduce, so that gives me the answer, which is 11 over 12. I hope you have found this lesson on the review of fractions helpful, and I hope you will join us next time.